Hello, this is Emery PV's Game Journal, and first entry of the Game Journal, and this game is Shout Out to Colossus, released in 2005 for the PlayStation 2. This is the game we're going to be covering for this one. I've already recorded the footage for the game with the capture card I have, but I'm just recording this after the fact just because I was really tired when I was playing this, so... But yes, this game, I guess to go over the story right here while the game is loading up, you play as a character, a young boy named Wander, who you will see is the first guy with the sword. You ride around on your horse named Agro in order to save a young girl named, I believe she's not named in the game, like almost everyone, but her name is Mono. And you're given a very vague amount of story. The game goes a lot into tonality and very vague themes, but the game kind of lets you imagine everything on your own, as it were, in order to just kind of get whatever you need. Basically, it lets you fill in the gaps on your own, if that makes any sense. But that's not really important right now. The game, I would classify it personally as an action game, but you could go with adventure as well, and I'll explain why in a moment here. But yes, this is actually... So, the main gameplay gimmick, I guess, of the game is you take place in an open world, somewhat open world. There's not really side quests or anything to do, but it's a vast, expansive area, which, as you go to new areas, you will fight new colossi, but you can only fight one at a time, and it has to be in a specific order, so you can't go fight, out of the 16 that exist in the game, you can't go and fight the 14th immediately. You have to fight the first one first, second one second, third one third, obviously. But, as the game goes more and more, you fight more of them. And the main gimmick or challenge is that they are, with two exceptions, they are massive, massive beasts. They are... The difficulty, more so than actually getting to kill them, is having to climb up to their weak spots. And, once you do that, you actually get to physically attack them. And, I think... kind of real quick, I guess I'll say, is that the reason I was talking about the idea of different genre, or you could classify it as an action or an adventure genre, is because the only thing I would say that stops it from being an adventure game is the fact that Wander has a health bar, and I think there's just one too many precision skill requirements for the game. The game requires you a few times to make very accurate arrow shots, and specifically to do platforming puzzles, as it were. Platforming and having to make precision grappling points, or make precision grapples, if that makes any sense. And here you can see Wander is using a fun little mechanic where as long as your character's in a light source, you can hold the circle button to shine up your sword, and it will actually direct the light in the direction that the boss needs to go. I don't end up really using it too often in this footage, just because I've played this game 100 times. I could probably go to each spot just off the back of my hand. Like I said, this game came out in 2005, but it's probably one of my favorite games I've ever played. I've played it a number of times over the years. Every couple of years or so, I'll replay it pretty quickly. And, I think part of that is just because it's a very simple but fun game, and I really do like the story, the tone, the themes, the architecture, and the music, the vibe you get kind of from it, if that makes any sense, the exhilaration you do get from certain bosses. And going back to the gameplay, I guess, the controls, I'll leave it at just saying they're a little bit odd, honestly. But they're nothing insane, but they're not typical for video game controls, I would say. And I'll just leave it at that, I guess. But as I was saying before, I think you could, just to put a pin in the conversation, you could classify this as an adventure game if you really wanted to. I personally would say it's an action game, but if you're going into a marketing term, you'd say action-adventure or open world, even though none of those are 100% really accurate from a scholarly point of view, but, that's besides the point. But real quick, I guess, before I go into anything else, kind of talking about, a few weeks ago we were talking about Cyberpunk 2077, and this game actually ended up saving itself from, the dreaded feature creep, in that originally this game, in its initial pitch package, I think to Sony, went to them. This game was developed by Team Ico, who, of course, before this made Ico, after this made The Last Guardian, I think that one was more of a collaboration between them and Japan Studios, though. But either way, this is probably their most well-known game, and for good reason, in my opinion. Like I said, it's one of my favorite games ever, obviously, so I might be biased in that. But yeah, they came to Sony, and they had pitched the game originally with having 48 Colossi in the game. Obviously, if you remember what I said earlier, there's only 16, but between them, there was actually going to be 24, and they ended up actually removing a few of them in order to, in their opinions, refine the gameplay and to better tune the ones that they did have finished. I think there is actually a fan mod that came out, I think within the past year, that actually did take the unfinished models of the bosses that are in the game files, the modeled areas that are removed from the game files, putting them in there, putting in the scripting to kind of piece together and then fill in the gaps that were never made to fully make the bosses. And it's very interesting, but you do see why they were cut. Some of them are just a little too difficult, and they involve puzzles or specific moves that are only used in those one bosses. And I think that's, going back to what I was saying before, I think that's another reason why I like the gameplay of this so much, is that the game, is pretty, I guess, congruent from beginning to end. It's consistent, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Is that from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, you're doing the same standard formula as you were at the beginning. Just like, the original Mario games, you're just running and jumping pretty much. Like, sometimes you might get new abilities in those, so maybe it's not exactly the perfect analogy, but they are very similar. And this game, like I said, the first boss fight to the second one, to the 5th, to the 12th, the 16th, you're all doing the same stuff. And it is more about platforming on top of the boss than anything else. Sometimes they'll need you to take an arrow, sometimes they'll need you to jump. Sometimes, I think there is one boss that requires you to pick up an item that's only available in that spot, which is definitely the strangest one of the game, but that's besides the point. But the fact that they were actually able to stop the feature creep and polish the game that they had on their hands. They looked at the bosses that they had, they said, let's focus on improving these guys and just polishing them up. And I think they did a really good job with that. And I think it was obviously for the best that they ended up doing that here. Going back to the controls really quick, I talked about, you can see here, it had been a few months since I had played, and I had completely forgotten what the jump button was. It's triangle, by the way. Don't know who decided that, but oh well. But yeah, here's where you jump up on the boss here, and this is what I was saying before. It's more of a puzzle than anything else. Like, obviously you can see I'm climbing on fur here. You find little grappling points where you can, rest yourself and then continue the climb a little bit later. And in the bottom right, I guess I'll explain this real quick. So in the top left, obviously you see a health bar there. That is the boss itself, the Colossi. They all have names, but I have a difficulty remembering all of them. But this is the second one. Most people call him the Cow Colossi. It's just a nickname just because he has physical similarities to that. You can see his health bar in the top left, and each boss in this game has 2 weak points. And the weak points with them are kind of hidden across the character. There's some that are easy to find, like this one is, he's got one at the back and one at the front. Pretty easy to remember here. But, the difficulty is getting there without falling off the Colossi and having to start over. Or, as the pink circle you can see at the bottom of the right hand of the screen there, without it completely defilling, that is your stamina meter. And this isn't the first game with a stamina meter to my knowledge, but it is the first game that became popular with having pretty much the whole core gameplay revolve around it. As you can see there, once you're done stabbing, that spot will disappear and you need to find the next one to finish the boss off. You have to expose and destroy every single weak point on every Colossi in order to kill them. You can't just do one and then be done with it. But yeah, the difficulty is more so just getting to the spots than anything else. And it's not actually, you gotta shoot the arrow at him and dodge the attacks. It's more so, just physically getting onto the creature, because it can be difficult sometimes. But yeah, this game kind of, I think, is a precursor to games, going back to the stamina meter, is kind of a precursor to games like the Zelda series, which I think since Skyward Sword have been kind of having an obsession with stamina meters. Not necessarily in a bad way, but I think Breath of the Wild, which is a much more popular, well-known, and higher-selling game than Shadow of the Colossus here, definitely put the idea of the stamina bar into a lot of people's consciousness with games, for better or for worse. I personally like it a lot. I think especially with this game. This is probably the game that I think has the best use of a stamina meter, maybe ever. But yeah, I don't know. It kind of was like a big, I guess, a prolific game, more so than I think anyone on the team thought it would be. They just were making a follow-up to Eco, which you could argue it's a prequel, but I won't get into that. But they just wanted to make a follow-up to that game, which did surprisingly well for what it was, and, you know, they decided to make this. And it really was, I think, in a lot of ways ahead of its time. A lot of games, and if you look online, especially with older YouTube videos, you can find so many people online who are, once again, are prolific creators who talk about how they're very inspired by this game, or their homage to this game, like, right here. I can't tell you how many videos I've seen that parody this, which, yeah, you might not be able to hear the music very well, but the death scene of every Colossi in the game. Every time you kill a Colossi, you feel a lot of real excitement, encouragement, and just, you know, like, victorious kind of gravitas. Yeah, yes, I killed the beast. And then this sad music plays, and these dark souls come out of the dead Colossi, and they impale you, and suddenly you feel pretty bad for what you did. You realize that these are just poor little animals that you're slaughtering, pretty much. And some of them are a bit more hostile than other ones, of course, but obviously, you know, the game does a good job of conveying its emotion to you and making you feel, you know, just anything, which I think is a problem with games. I think a lot of games out there, they can make you feel excited or scared, but I think it's really hard for games to slow down and make you feel upset. The only game where I felt like I had genuine turbulent sadness is probably the Metal Gear series, Metal Gear Solids 3 and 5. 3 was just because the characters are very likable and a lot of unfortunate things happen to them. Metal Gear Solid 5 actually does it in a gameplay perspective, where they actually end up making you removing certain characters that you've personally gained over the course of the story, so you feel like you've really lost a lot. But yeah, I don't know. I think that this game is probably one of the first games I can think of that a lot of people genuinely said that made them extremely emotional, and I think that that's something to be proud of. And I think that Team Eco did a great job with this game. And I think that's pretty much all I got to say on the video right now. So I will thank you for your time. Have a great day.